Yeah. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to Colored Commentary. That is right, Colored Commentary. This is our first podcast out of the gate. We're so excited that you have started listening to us. We'd love to spend some time just telling you a little bit about who we are. I am your host. I am Markus Lloyd, and with me in the studio is my co-host and best friend, Mr. Antwuan Malone. Say what's up, Antwuan.
What is up? How are y'all doing, man? I'm excited.
You should be excited.
I'm excited. I love starting new things.
Yes. And this is fun for us because ultimately, what we're doing in here is what we do every time we get together. Yeah, we just kind of take different aspects of culture, Christianity, race, and we just, on the front porch, right, in the house, in the car, we just do this, go back and forth.
We just start talking about stuff, and we're like, man, what? I wonder if people would be interested in hearing us, wrestle through these things.
Right. And particularly because we are engaged with this organization that we're a part of called Threaded, which is ultimately a Christian organization that is about inspiring relationships, reconciliation, and collaborative action amongst the diverse body of Christ. Therefore, we decided to call this Colored Commentary, right?
Indeed.
Where it's not just about, and I think, if you're, I'm curious for you now, Antwuan, like we've got this name Colored Commentary with all the podcasts that you listen to. If you pull up your podcast list and you see that title, Colored Commentary, what are you thinking when you see that?
I'm probably a little triggered by colored,
like
fair. And then I want to know who's talking.
Right. Yeah, you want to know.
Like,
wait a second.
Wait a minute. Yeah. Because if the wrong, color is talking, it could be a problem, but.
It goes to that point of, in some ways we can say that, but not everybody can say that.
Yeah, and that's kind of, we'll talk about that. But that's one of the things that this conversation is, that there's going to be things that we get to talk about in this space that because we're people of color, we can talk about those things.
Yeah.
And that's one of the gifts that I think that this podcast will be for people.
Right. Yeah. And I think one of the, and just to kind of, walk into that even more so, it won't be just a black experience. Right. Although there'll be aspects of that which will be heavy because both of us are living in, African-American lives and as our friend Deborah says, our African-American earth suits, if you will.
Yeah.
But part of what comes out of this...
Deborah at some point, I'm sure.
Yeah, she's definitely
She'll be a hoot. You won't forget her.
You won't forget her, yeah.
She's pretty awesome.
And so, part of even talking about Deborah and thinking about the crew that we have, it's what inspired part of this commentary too, is that the sort of the tagline, if you will, for Colored Commentary is that it is colorful conversations by colorful people about Christianity, race, and culture. And so, several years ago when we started Threaded, it was about 5 years ago, one of the things that was so fun about it is that it started with this white pastor and myself getting together to talk about what we thought about Ferguson. He was struggling through some things, and he called me and said, "Hey, man, I need to talk to you about what I'm seeing." Right.
Okay.
And so we come together and we have a discussion, and what we find is in the midst of that discussion that we're both now getting privy to a completely, I'm not going to say completely opposite perspective, but definitely a different perspective on what we were seeing in the news. And we walked away from that conversation, I think, with a broader understanding of the whole thing and how it looks, and then, what kind of aspects of that triggers different people. Mm-hmm. And it really inspired us to do it more. And then as we did that more, we started reaching out and bringing in other people into the conversation, people from Latino background, people from Chinese and Korean backgrounds, and even more people from different aspects of demographics, if you will, of black people, bringing them into the conversation. And we just started bringing we had a book that we started going through, and we just started talking about the topics that we're seeing on TV, different things we've read, different aspects of history from different perspectives, different cultural perspectives, different, although race is not a real thing, different racial perspectives. And it was just such a fruitful, eye-opening conversation that we just said, man, we have got to create venues where people can do this on a regular basis, because we have all grown so mature in our faith. Like, our faith has been growing from this, right? So you experienced this, right?
And I think, in addition to it just being like something that's cool and can be an add-on,
right.
I think one of the reasons we've been inspired to do this for years is we think it's necessary to to the space that we're living in, the society we're living in, as Christians, you say, man, how do we take the gospel to where the pain is?
Yeah.
And there's definitely pain in the racial environment in our current society. And so it begins with looking internally and saying, how do we, our brothers and sisters in Christ, begin to look at that and allow ourselves to discuss and learn from each other and all of that. And so I think that whole experience was like, man, it was like an oasis in the desert on some level. And like, man, we've got to be able to bring this opportunity to others, not just to help them be better, but actually to be able to help represent who God is in a place where He's needed.
Yeah, and I love that you're saying that, because that's a place that I have been not wrestling with lately, but just wanted to be even more clear about, right? Like there's definitely a missional aspect to this, where we're thinking, okay, our society is changing around us, right? How do we articulate the gospel more effectively in these environments with these diverse people?
Right.
And I think that's a great motivation. Like, I'm so glad it's that instead of what it was historically, like, oh, our environment's changing, let's leave and go move north or wherever.
Or take over.
Right, exactly. So, but I think there's another side, and this is where I think the color commentary comes out of, is I am realizing that not only is this beneficial to reflecting, or more accurately reflecting, the image of God, and not only is it beneficial to engaging different cultures and environment and being able to know how to take the gospel in there, but it actually, as I said earlier, it grows my own faith.
Right.
It has become in some ways essential for my growth.
Right.
There's only so much. I realized there was only so much growth I can do in my narrow, homogeneous environments, whether that's a cultural homogeneity or economic homogeneity. And as I've branched out in these other places, like, I'm just like growing immensely in my faith in God, and it's been through this. And so that's where it's like, hey, we need to create a space where we can have these conversations in places where we're learning new perspectives, but then also bring in our friends who are helping us do that.
Right. It's kind of, I think, like you're saying that, it makes me think of Paul's experience and how he went from culture to culture.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
You think about how well he was able to defend the faith in a space in a really conclusive kind of way.
Yeah.
Probably because he was able to expose himself to multiple cultural environments, Ephesus, and all the different places that he went to. And to think of it as a part of our sanctification, is the way that you're talking about it. As, man, the scriptures say that we are growing to be more like Jesus.
Yeah,
we want to be the most like Jesus, and that's going to mean that we can learn how to interface with people who are not like us.
Yeah, and then when we are able to do that, going again, chicken or the egg, then we definitely essentially have the opportunity to reflect more truth about who God is. Right. It's that
internally, like you were saying.
Right.
Like, when we look at ourselves in the mirror.
Yeah.
And when others from the outside look at us and see, hey, this is who God is.
Yeah, and that's really, and I talk about this all the time when we're talking about Threaded, it reminds me of when I went to Italy, and I went to the Vatican. Mm-hmm. And in the Vatican, there's this great tapestry room, which is just, this tapestry is just this big cloth that's woven together by thread, right? And I remember going into this room, and my wife Lisa kind of going, what? This is interesting. Are these paintings? And we're looking and thinking, like, are these paintings? Because the pictures were so intricate, and they were so detailed and so colorful that you're looking and going, somebody painted this. And then as you get closer and able to lean in a little bit on these works of art, you look and you can see the threads in there, and you go, whoa, wait a second. This is woven together. These are literally just threads coming together. And I remember my immediate thought, Antwuan, when I saw this and I saw the threads in there and realized this was tapestry and not painting, I went, who created this?
Right.
And I think as I think about the church, I desire the church to elicit the same response when people look at us. Right, that when they see us and they see us working together, they see us fully united, when they see all the colors of the rainbow, all the cultures of the world, dare I say all the tribes, tongues, and nations, all working together. Here we go. But when they see that they will go, who is the God that threaded these people together? Yeah. Right? And so there's this, like you said, there's this inward in which it's more like, I've got a puzzle piece and I'm coming to the puzzle, And I'm realizing that my piece is just part of a bigger piece. And then when I put it with the other pieces, I realize how I fit and how that benefits me to now know where I fit in the midst of the image of God. So that's an internal. But then that external, like, then how does the world see the people of God, and how does that make God's name, as we say in our home, more famous and reflect Him better?
Amen.
So those are good things. So that's ultimately.
Yeah, that's kind of the, you've summed up kind of what Thread is about. At the end of the day, it's about helping people see Jesus better.
Yeah, absolutely. And we hope that's the same for this podcast, that the things that we come in, we're not coming in with so much ethnocentrism, if you will, that it's about making the Latino case or the black case or the white case. But really it's trying to make the case for a God that loves all people. And so we hope that, because there's going to be things as we get into topics and things, there's going to be, if people don't hear this podcast, they're going to hear some things and they're going to go, well, what are they trying to do? And so this is part of like what we're trying, just kind of set up, like, here's what we're trying to do. We are desperately, and I know this is about you as well, desperately in love with the church.
Yes.
And wanting to see it. I would speak to that. I know that's something.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at, man. Like, before, like, I'm excited about, or I believe deeply in the mission of the church, and if I were to say there's a mission on my own personal life, it is that someone asked me several years ago, and we were trying to figure out what your purpose is. And he's like, man, you can ask yourself these two questions. The first question is, what's the greatest need in the world according to you? Right?
Yeah, sure.
And so everyone can answer that differently. When I answered it, I said the greatest need for the world is that they know who God is.
Yeah.
Right. And then it says, what can you do about it? Oh, man, well, I can try to help introduce God to everyone as best I can.
Yeah.
And then the next question is, okay, what are the challenges to that? Like, that begins to give you some meat on, like, where can you go next? And the answer for me back then was, man, the church is, there must be something about, God has chosen to use the church to help the world see who He is.
Right.
And for some reason, the influence and the voice of the church has been weakened.
It's languishing.
It's languishing.
Yeah.
So for me, it's been like, man, how can we reintroduce the world to who the church really is, or who God really is?
Right. Or at least what the church is supposed to be.
Right. I'm talking about in the most purest
form.
form.
Yeah, that's good.
And then and that means that we had to look internally and say, man, what are the ways that we're shooting? For me, this is what I was thinking. What are the ways we're shooting ourselves in the feet with that?
Yeah.
Right. And this is one of the spaces. I do other work as well, but this is one of the spaces I'm like, man, the world gets a distracted, convoluted picture of who God is because inside of God's church, we have not dealt well with how to love people who are different than us.
Yeah.
On a simple level and on a systemic, large-scale social level.
Right.
Even inside our own community, let alone how we champion those ideas outside of our community. Yeah. And so the work that we do for me here is about helping the church have the voice it should have so that the community, so that God's kingdom come and His will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Man,
and you said something that I think is very is apropos to kind of be thinking about even what we're working in this space of color commentary and threaded. Is at least for me, there is this calling to the unity of the church,
right,
and doing that, right? Because there's an aspect of, right, and this is debatable, I'm sure, to some, but there's an aspect of outside of the church, there's a lot of things that just cannot get done, right? Because in some ways, the only thing that's driving me in the church is Jesus driving it, right? And so I've felt a calling for, gosh, it's been close to 15 years now, to just really see the church coming together as one. Because as you know, many people who are in the unity work bring these verses into the conversation because they should. John 17, 20 through 20, 23. Really, Jesus, about to go to the cross, find Him in the garden, and He's praying. And anybody who's looking at what Jesus was looking at, whatever He prays in that moment is going to be extremely important.
Sure, it's almost last words.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not exactly, but it's
close,
it
feels
right
like that,
there.
right? The intensity of the prayer, right? He's praying for the disciples. Then the prayer switches over to those who would come after the disciples, who would be impacted by those disciples' message, which is Jesus's message.
Right.
And his ultimate prayer is that the people would be one as He and the Father are one. And that when the church is one, when they are fully, when, again, thinking about that tapestry argument, when they look like that, when then they do that, then the world will know that Jesus was sent by God and that God loves the world just the way the Father loves the Son.
Yeah, I love that verse because of the stakes that it lays down. It says, it's not that then the people will feel great about the message. It's like, no, then in a sense, Jesus's claims will be legitimized in the minds of the world.
Right.
You know, and wow, what an amazing thing to think that God would rest the legitimacy of his mission that he sent his son on his ability of us to be unified.
Our ability to be unified.
Our ability to be unified.
And that's what's it's so profound, right? Like when you understand the weight of that, then you realize our unity is our strongest evangelistic tool, if you will.
Yeah.
Right? Like we've got all these, programs and different things that we do or whatnot, but what ultimately Jesus is saying in that prayer is like, look, if you can just work together and do life together and just be not uniform, right? You don't have to look all the same, but be united in spirit and mind, as it talks about in Philippians. If you can just do that, that'll actually do all the work that I'm asking you to do.
Yeah.
In fact, you don't even have to do a lot of work. Just just putting yourself in that situation where you live like that, people will be, again, back to the tapestry, they will be drawn in to go, who are these people?
Right.
And who is this God that brings them together? Because we know when we leave that circle of Christ, if you will, and we live out in society, we can just turn on the news and see that division is rampant.
Yeah.
And so it's this, how do we create an environment where people, when they're experiencing and frustrated by the division that they see all around them, where's a safe place they can go to see true unity, right? A respite from that division. And the church is supposed to be that, and it's supposed to be something that just pulls people in that way. Right. And it's a place that we need to work.
Division is the normative,
Exactly.
And so you almost just don't question, outside of, you just don't question that the world is divided. You kind of decide it is divided. And so I'm going to live within that. So when something like the gospel comes and says, no, it doesn't have to be divided, then your whole world is shaking because you've been built on, man, we're in a divided world and I got to fend for myself. I know it's the unity thing that I think brought us together, actually, because I was thinking about a lot of the unity stuff. And I think one of our first conversations from when we first met each other and really kind of got the chance to talk to each other was around unity and our passions and thoughts around how we could do that. And at the time, we had a lot of different ideas
lots
for
going on with
for how to do that. But it's fun that we're like here now.
Well, we always said, man, we got to find a venue in which to work together on. You know what I mean? We just always sit around and talk about it. So this is great, and you're right. Like, and that's ultimately like the heart, if you will, of colored commentary, is recognizing that there is a very big divide, which is around culture, which is around race. Color, if you will. And so to be able to bring these different perspectives in, we're hoping that for the people of Christ, right, in which they have built these walls of division between themselves, even though Jesus tore those down on the cross, that maybe hearing perspectives of your brothers who love Christ just like you, just hearing the different ways in which they look at life, that in some way that will draw myself and it'll draw others into what I think we talk about in Threaded a lot, the aisle of our between our platforms, right? A place where we can come together and go recognize that actually there's an identity that's stronger that should be bringing us together as opposed to these other sub-identities, and we'll talk about this at some point in another podcast, that draw us away. So that's what we're hoping is being done here in Colored Commentary to bring that in.
And you guys should join us.
Yes.
And at some point, we're going to get to hear from people or what have you.
Yeah.
Like, I love to get emails or whatever once we get all that stuff set up. Like, just to hear how people are wrestling through what was being said. And one of the things I'm going to love personally about what we get to do is there's going to be some places where we talk where it's like, man, we're talking to people who have never really thought about this stuff before. And so we're trying to, address new ideas for many. But there's also going to be many topics in conversation that are more complicated and will also allow us to go deeper for people who've been having these conversations for months or years.
Right. Kind of 2.0 versus 1.0.
And be able to. And so it's a little bit something for everyone. And so hopefully the idea, from a from an experience standpoint, is that you kind of go through a journey, that you kind of grow with us as we're growing and beginning to look at more and more issues. And how difficult or how to overcome the issues that we're facing in this area.
I love that. I read something from the lady who was talking about, she was writing a blog, and she was talking in her blog about learning in public. And it's sort of the idea of she had held off on doing a blog because she wanted to learn everything and then be able to do it, but then found this great understanding of we've got to kind of learn in public. Like, it's good for people to do it. So there's aspects of in which we'll be in this conversation learning alongside you, the listener, right, who's going along in there. But then, and I think this is an important thing. If I'm listening to a podcast, right, not only do I want to know what the podcast is about, but I also kind of want to know, like, well, why are you guys doing it? You know what I mean? Like, what, for lack of a better way, like, what is your skin in this game? Like, what is it that pushes you forward? We already talked about, in some ways, from a very religious standpoint, like, we have a God that moves us in this direction. We want to see God's name. We want to see the people of God. But I don't know, personally, like, what, for you, Antwuan, like, is there any personal skin that you have in this game that moves you into this conversation more deeply and more regularly?
It's the challenge to, it's still theocentric for me,
Okay,
but it's the challenge to make Christian principles real and practical and pragmatic. I think we live in a space, especially in America, where Christian ideas are talked about a lot, but they can fall into the abstract space. In other words, I know that the Bible says and God says to do this, and I agree with those things on a Sunday morning, but then I walk out and I face these very real issues in life. Yeah. And in this particular space, social issues, racial issues. And one of the skins I have in this game is I believe that the Christian way of living applies to everyday life. And I think that that's challenging and difficult and not always simple. And I want to be in the conversation personally. Actually, I want to be learning personally, but I also want to help bridge this gap between the perceived abstractness of Christianity and God's kingdom and the concrete reality of the problems that we currently live in. And I want to do that in multiple spaces, but this is one of the places where I see the greatest need and therefore the greatest opportunity.
Right.
To speak within. And so this has risen on the list of opportunities for me to, man, we can do something here and really, in a sense, put skin on God, in a sense, and say, this is what it means to actually live into the reality of Christianity outside of the abstract ideas.
Yeah. No, that's good. I can see that piece as you in your own personal Christianity and wanting to exhibit that. And I think about for myself, like, particularly in this conversation when we're talking about race, I think about, and again, we'll do this at some point, but I think about my own cultural identity struggle of just trying to understand as an African-American male who grew up in a predominantly white society, and having to find my identity in the midst of that. And even beyond that, right, because I can still move differently. You and I are both married to white women named Lisa. Not the same person, right? But
not to be confused. Although cut from the same cloth. On some levels,
they kind of look very similar. So it's weird. It is very strange. But the skin in the game is I've got to figure this out at home. Like being able to maneuver into the cultural space of the world is one thing, but then what many people get to do is maybe they get into the cultural space and they're wrestling with it, and then they get frustrated about it, and then they go home to their person who maybe is very similar to them, homogeneously, if that's a word, all black
same
family,
race,
all white, whatever. And they can kind of go and sit and rest in that, and even hide in some ways in that, right? If potentially, but in some ways we don't get to do that. I don't get to do that. I go home and I've got, if I'm mad, right, from a very ethnocentric space, I got to go home,
right?
And I'm looking at this white woman across from me, and I'm going, oh, okay, I got it. This is real. Like I got to really.
And we
got to
raise our kids in that,
Correct.
because if our kids grow up and feel a real sense of black pride or whatever,
right,
come home and see,
Yeah, and that's
a
part
white
of it
mom,
too.
can I love, how does that, how do I
that?
reconcile those things?
How do I reconcile those things? And I've got 2 boys that are, they're these biracial boys, and I'm looking and going, how do I help them through this? And how do I, to your point, nurture them to a place where they can enter into this conversation well, and be leaders in this conversation, and hopefully be reconcilers and bridge builders in the midst of it, right?
Right.
And so it becomes a very real place for me. It's not something I can kind of close the book on and stop reading, but the book is always open.
Yeah, and this conversation, like, because of that, because of what you're saying at home, and even the voices we're going to have in the public square, it's going to be a lot of things that we say that people, like, there are stakes. To things, because we're going to hear. I've already heard in my past, hey, you're not black enough, or you're too black in your stance, or what have you, or different types of things. And so there's going to be there's some stakes. If you know me, I'm one that typically puts my. Do I put my foot in my mouth? I don't know.
I think of the 2 of us, I think it's going to be me before you.
I don't know. We were both. This is how we be. Like, we're like, hey, if we are in the room, more than likely, if we're going to say something,
right,
that shifts, that makes people say, "What?"
Yeah. Well, but what I love, and that's one of the reasons why I like the podcast, is I think together we are able to rescue one another from whatever. Right? It's because we're both sort of you're more of a critic than I am, but we both do not mind taking the opposite argument,
right?
In
a
some
contrarian
point of view, right?
Yeah.
I think you come from it in more of, and you say this all the time, mind, body, spirit, is that what you say? And so you come from it more from the mind standpoint. I come from it more of the heart, or the heart spot. And so we help each other well in that if I'm out there just like going after it, you know what I mean, with all this passion and whatnot, you'd be like. But let me give you more of an intellectual thought about this, right? And then also to go, I don't think what you said is what you think you just said, right? Like, so
like you were heard.
Yeah, let me challenge that a little bit, right? And so I think we do that with each other, and so hopefully that'll be fun to do. But going back, I think I'm the one who puts my foot in my mouth way more, because I don't think as much as you do before I speak.
I don't know. We about to see.
Well, that'll be something we can do a poll. We'll get a poll on it.
Who's going to be the first one to get some negative emails from somebody? That's what's going to happen. Nah, I mean, I think it's just one of those things, man. But again, it's what's cool to me, because I think to come with that it creates an authentic. Mm-hmm. Like the last thing I want to be is inauthentic. Yeah. And superficial and unthought through. As we approach ideas, and so, and
this is a place that we can come with some great thoughts, but hopefully as we talk and bring others in, it expand our thoughts, right? And look, there's lots of topics out there,
absolutely,
lots of topics out there,
and growing,
and lots of things that we may even jump into, right? Like I'm thinking, there's kind of. I almost don't want to say this, because I know that there are folks out there who maybe this is their first engagement at all in this space.
Are these about to be some eye rolls, some virtual eye rolls? As soon as you say something, somebody like, here we go again.
Yeah, exactly. And at the same time, like, there's people who are like, I can't wait to hear about that.
Right.
So if I've been in the work for a while now, so when I hear some of these topics come up, I'm like, are we really going to be at that sort of 1.0 level?
Hey, yo, and I think even me and you are kind of like that. Like, we're kind of like, I guess we got to talk about that because we really want to go to these other,
we want to try to, span it a little bit, hit the paradigm as much as it can.
So we'll all get through it together. Is what I'm trying to say. Like, it'll be painfully necessary for all of us,
and try to come with the similar energy to every topic.
Yes,
right?
That's correct.
So I'm thinking things like color blindness. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure that's something. Whenever we get into this conversation, we're going to deal with that. We're going to obviously deal with. Look, you can already hear the eye roll in my voice. You already hear your voice. We're going to deal with white privilege.
But there's somebody out there that's like,
white privilege, colorblindness.
Colorblindness. Like, is Jesus colorblind?
Yeah,
it's a great question.
Yeah, right.
One that's worth discussing.
Exactly. We'll deal with identity. We'll talk about reparations. You know what I mean? We'll deal with that.
That's a scary one for lots of people.
Absolutely. Narratives, that's one of the things in Threaded that has been so good is when we've gotten on panels and talked about narratives, right? Cultural narratives and how that plays out in this conversation and in the use of the gospel as we go even evangelicalism, evangelistically.
Very important, I think.
Yeah, such a good thing. People have been dying to hear about that. We'll talk historically about just how we got here. We'll talk about I want to hear from people who are saying, hey, tell me what the Asian church is struggling with right now. Like, how do they enter that conversation? We'll talk about things that are hitting Latino Americans, thinking about immigration and things. We'll hopefully bring Oscar in for some of that. Yeah, so there's just lots of different ways. And then as stuff comes up in the culture, we'll want to hit those too, right? We'll be grabbing things out of the news and saying, okay, how do we deal with this? Or if something pops off that's a negative where there's division and whatnot, we can just come in here and kind of go, okay, let's try to unpack that.
Yeah.
Right. And even because it's you and I, because not only do we sit around and talk about these issues, but sometimes we talk about movies.
I was going to say, I was waiting on you to get
there.
Well,
okay,
Black Panther 2 is on the way. So you may as well, whenever that happens,
it's going to happen.
We're gonna probably talk about that because that's happening.
In fact, that's we would. I think that's how we even got started.
It is. We did a Facebook Live doing Black Panther and talking about Black Panther, and people kind of liked it. I thought. We thought, well, man, maybe.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, I think. I'm hoping we articulated as much as we knew as far as what this particular podcast was going to be about. Colored commentary. I don't know anything else you're thinking of. Like
I said, I just want to invite you to join the journey, if you will. Like, just come alongside us and learn with us. And we want to hear from you. We want to topics that might be interesting. At some point, we'll open that up. But the idea is what we said. We want to bring the gospel to this conversation because we think God has something to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we want to be people that can amplify what he's saying.
And I think it's important, and you said it is a journey that everyone's on, including ourselves. So as we said, we're learning in public here. We're bringing in folks that are going to help us and challenge our perspective and help us even know even more, right? And again, we want it to be a good opportunity for there to be colorful conversations by colorful people about Christianity, race, and culture. And so we hope that you will join us on the journey, just like Antwuan said. It'll be he and I jumping in here and other folks as well. But this is Colored Commentary, and we hope that you will come back, check us out, subscribe to the podcast, man. Check out Threaded online as well. wearethreaded.org, and you'll find stories of people who've gone through Threaded and some of the things that we're doing in the community that we have, and hear more about our projects. And then check us out, Facebook, We Are Threaded. We're all over that, Instagram. And so, so you've been listening to Colored Commentary with your host, Markus Lloyd, and my boy, my friend, my co-host, Antwuan Malone.
Yay.
You say your shout outs, good stuff. And we hope that you will come back next time and join us as we continue this conversation colorfully on Colored Commentary.